The council chamber of Meridian Prime hung suspended above the binary stars like a jewel caught between light and shadow. Rows of delegates from 100 different species filled the curved benches, their forms ranging from crystalline structures that hummed with electrical pulses to creatures that flowed like liquid mercury through specially designed containment fields. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the session to begin. Captain Victoria Cross stood alone in the center of the chamber. She was human, which meant she looked fragile to most of the assembled council. Her body was soft in comparison to the armored carapaces of the races, weak compared to the muscle density and small compared to almost everyone else in the room. Yet she stood with a calm that suggested she did not feel out of place. This was her third year attending the annual Species Assessment Council, and she had learned how to carry herself among powers far greater than her own. Ambassador made the first move. The collective existed as a hive mind, individual bodies that shared a single consciousness across light years of space. Its form was, with 4 arms and a structure that seemed to shift between solid and semi-liquid. When it spoke, the words came through a translator, but the tone was unmistakable. It was amused. Captain Cross said, its voice a harmonious blend of many frequencies, "We have discussed humanity's potential, your young civilization's surprising progress in space travel, your creative solutions to problems. But I have a question that has occurred to me. Tell us, what do humans consider their apex predator? Your world, we have read, produced you. What creature did you fear most before you learned to control your own world?" A ripple of laughter moved through the council. The question itself was not hostile, but it carried the weight of assumption. Most species in the galactic community had clear apex predators in their evolutionary history. They had evolved from prey animals and still respected the great predators of theirs. The races had their warrior castes who served as predators to other creatures. The Silicon base did not understand predation in the traditional sense, but they understood hierarchy and dominance. Humans, by most accounts, were newcomers. They had only recently achieved space travel. Their world, by all reports, was relatively young in cosmic terms. The question seemed designed to establish that humans were still primitive, still shaped by primal fears, still not quite evolved beyond their animal origins. Victoria smiled. It was not a nervous smile. It was not the smile of someone who felt threatened. It was the smile of someone who knew something the rest of the room did not. She let that smile linger for a moment before she spoke, and in that moment something shifted in the chamber. The delegates leaned forward. Even the Silicon-based seemed to focus their attention more sharply. "That is a good question, Ambassador," Victoria said. Her voice was calm and measured. "But I think you are asking the wrong thing. You are asking what creature humans feared. The answer to that is much more complex than any of you might realize." Counselor, a silicon-based entity whose thoughts moved through crystalline lattice networks, made a sound like grinding stone. "Explain yourself, human. Our time is valuable." Victoria nodded. She had expected this impatience. The silicon-based species did not waste energy on pleasantries or long explanations. They wanted information, data, facts. Victoria was prepared to give them exactly that. "Humans did not evolve in isolation on our world," she began. "Earth is not a gentle place. It is not a comfortable world designed for easy living. My species emerged onto a planet that actively tried to kill us. We faced ice ages where entire continents froze solid. We faced predators larger than anything most of you have encountered. We faced starvation, disease, and competition from countless other species all fighting for the same resources. Earth is what you would call. Admiral, whose species had evolved through constant warfare and military hierarchy, made a clicking sound that translated as interest. The warrior race respected struggle. They respected species that had to fight to survive. "So you are saying you feared creatures like us," said. "Predators, hunters, beasts with teeth and claws." Victoria's smile widened slightly. "No, Admiral, that is not what I am saying. You asked what humans consider their apex predator. The answer is not what hunted us. The answer is what we became." The chamber fell silent. The translator system seemed to pause, as if even they were confused by the response. "I do not understand," said. "You are saying that humans are apex predators. Based on what we can observe, your species is relatively weak physically. Yours is short. Your strength is limited compared to many others." "Physical strength is not what makes something an apex predator," Victoria replied. She moved to the center of the chamber, and the light from the binary stars caught her eyes. "Not on Earth, not anywhere else that matters." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. I can tell you the story of how humans came to understand what they truly are, she said. I can tell you about the day I learned what it means to be the apex predator of a, but that story does not begin here. It begins on Earth, in a place where few humans ever go. It begins with a question that seemed innocent at the time, but which changed everything I understood about my own species. Counselor made another grinding sound. You are going to tell us this story. If the council permits, Victoria said. The answer to Ambassador's question cannot be given in simple words. It must be understood through experience, through example, through the lessons that Earth teaches all who are born there. The council members exchanged signals between themselves. Some were skeptical, some were curious, but all of them recognized that something important was being offered. Few humans ever spoke so directly to the council about their species. Most were defensive or proud. Victoria was neither. She was 12 years before Victoria stood in the council chamber of Meridian Prime. She was a young biologist working in the Amazon region of Earth. She was not famous then. She was not important to any galactic body. She was simply a scientist trying to understand the world she came from, documenting species and ecosystems that had existed for millions of years. The research outpost was small, built on the edge of civilization where the jungle began to swallow everything that humans tried to construct. There were only 7 people on the team that year. Victoria, her mentor doctor, a field technician named Tors, and 4 support staff members whose names she would later struggle to remember clearly. The jungle had a way of making everything besides immediate survival seem distant and unreal. The outpost itself was little more than reinforced buildings connected by covered walkways, surrounded by a fence that was meant to keep dangerous animals out and the research equipment safe. But Victoria had worked in the jungle long enough to know that no fence was truly safe. The jungle did not respect human boundaries. It tested them constantly, looking for weaknesses. On the morning everything changed, Victoria was reviewing data within the main lab. They had been studying the hunting patterns of a particular predator species that lived deep in the jungle. The data was strange. The patterns did not match any known animal behavior in their catalogs. The kills were too precise. The timing was too calculated. The predator was not eating all of its prey, which meant it was hunting for reasons beyond simple nutrition. This does not make sense, said, his gray hair falling across his forehead as he leaned closer to the data display. He was 63 years old and had spent his entire career studying animals. He had seen things in the jungle that younger scientists struggled to believe were real, yet even he seemed troubled by what the data was showing. It is like they are studying the prey animals the way we are studying them, said from across the room. She was sharpening tools, preparing for the day's collection work, was 35, born and raised in the region, and she understood the jungle in ways that no amount of education could teach. Her instincts were good. Victoria had learned to trust's reading of the environment. That is impossible, said, but his voice suggested he did not entirely believe his own words. Victoria did not answer. She was looking at the map they had created, marking the locations of the kills and the movement patterns of the predator species. There was something in the pattern that made her skin prickle. It was not random. It was not following the normal routes that animals took through the jungle. It was following a design, a plan, a strategy. We need to see this ourselves, Victoria said. The automated systems are giving us the data, but we need to understand what is actually happening. Looked at her over his glasses. The jungle is getting more dangerous, Victoria. We have lost 3 wildlife cameras this month. Something is destroying them deliberately. Whatever is out there is intelligent. It knows we are watching. Then we observe more carefully, Victoria replied. We go deeper. We look at what is really happening instead of waiting for the data to be delivered to us. Stopped sharpening her tools. I will go with you, but is right about one thing. Something is wrong out there. I can feel it. The birds are quiet. The monkeys are not using their normal paths. Everything is watching and waiting. They prepared for the expedition. They took cameras, data collection equipment, weapons for protection against the normal jungle threats, and communication devices to stay in contact with the outpost. Wanted to go with them, but his knee was injured from a fall the week before, so he stayed behind to monitor their progress and prepare backup equipment. The jungle at dawn was a living cathedral of green. Mist hung between the trees like breath, and the sounds of the awakening forest created a constant background noise that was both peaceful and unsettling. Victoria, and made their way through the undergrowth carefully, following the path that their mapping data suggested the predator had taken most frequently. They found the first kill site within 2 hours. A deer-like creature lay partially hidden in the vegetation. It had been dead for perhaps 3 days. The predator had not eaten much of it. There was barely any damage to the body at all. The kill itself had been clean, quick, and precise. A single wound to the throat, the work of something that knew exactly where vital points were located. "This is fresh compared to what I expected," whispered. She was crouching beside the body, examining it without touching it. This was done by something that understood anatomy, something that wanted a quick kill, not a prolonged hunt. As they were examining the kill site, Victoria heard something that made her freeze. It was a sound she had heard before but could not quite place. It was almost like language, but not quite. Clicking and low tones that seemed to come from multiple sources at once. It was coming closer. Grabbed Victoria's arm. "We need to move now back to the outpost." But Victoria did not move. She was looking at the undergrowth around them, and she was beginning to understand what they were seeing. Movement. Coordinated movement from multiple angles. The predators were not approaching randomly. They were surrounding the area. They were cutting off escape routes while still keeping distance. It was a hunting strategy, a sophisticated one. "No," Victoria said quietly. "We are not going to run. If we run, they hunt us. If we stand here and observe, maybe we survive long enough to understand what is happening." Looked at her like she was crazy, but she did not argue. They stood in the center of the space where the kill lay, and they waited. The sounds grew closer. The clicking became more pronounced. And then, slowly, shapes began to emerge from the jungle. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. The shapes were vaguely familiar, but entirely wrong. They were tall, bipedal, covered in tattered clothing that had been made from animal hides. They moved with clear purpose and coordination. There were at least 5 of them that Victoria could see, but the pattern of movement suggested there were more hidden in the vegetation. Was not moving. She was not even breathing as far as Victoria could tell. One of the creatures stepped forward. It was taller than the others, with marks on its skin that looked deliberately created. Not natural scars, deliberate markings. It looked at Victoria with eyes that were unmistakably intelligent. Human eyes in a face that was too thin, too angular, too something. And then it smiled, showing teeth that had been filed to sharp points. "Welcome to our hunting ground," the creature said in broken but unmistakable English. Victoria realized with a shock that nearly brought her to her knees. These were not creatures at all. These were humans. These were humans like her, but evolved differently, shaped by generations of living in the deep jungle without modern technology, without civilization, without anything but survival and the hunt. Victoria's mind raced. The rules of the situation changed completely when she understood who she was facing. These were not creatures from another species. These were humans. Modified humans, perhaps, different humans, but still humans, and that realization brought its own set of dangers. The tall human who had spoken approached slowly. His movements were careful, measured, like a predator aware that sudden motion could cause prey to bolt. His hand moved toward the weapon at her hip, but Victoria put her own hand out to stop her. Running would confirm them as prey. Fighting would mark them as threats. The only option that made sense was to stand and understand. "We are not hunting you," the tall human said. His English was better when he spoke more slowly. His name, he said, was Owen. He had learned English as a child before his people had separated from modern civilization. His mother had been a linguist before she chose to join his community, before she chose the hunt over the cities. Owen explained that they had been watching the research outpost for weeks. They had been careful to understand what Victoria and her team were doing before deciding whether to approach. The destroyed cameras were not accidental. They were deliberate tests. Owen's people needed to know if these modern humans understood how to think like predators, if they were truly apex, or if they were just soft creatures playing at science. "Your team is weak," Owen said bluntly. "You make noise, you follow patterns, you rely on machines instead of senses, but you are curious. And curiosity is a sign that you might have kept the real skills of being human, skills that separate us from the animals we hunt." Found her voice. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing," Owen replied. "We want you to understand. We want you to know what we are. And then we want you to return to your outpost and tell your people what happens to those who enter hunting grounds without permission." Over the next 2 hours, Owen and his people showed Victoria and things that shattered their understanding of what humans could be. They showed them the intricate system of traps and snares designed not just to kill, but to understand the animals they hunted. They showed them the knowledge of plants, of weather, of animal behavior that was more advanced than anything in the research databases. They showed them the network of signals and communication that allowed Owen's people to coordinate hunts across vast distances with no technology, nothing but the human voice and human understanding. Owen took Victoria deeper into the jungle, just the two of them, leaving under the watch of his people. He wanted to explain, to show her what evolution looked like when separated from the modern world. His people, he said, had lived in the deep jungle for nearly 300 years. They were the descendants of people who had rejected civilization, who had decided that the hunt was the only honest way to live. Over those centuries, they had become something new, not a different species, still human. But humans who had lost nothing of their predatory nature. Humans who had sharpened that nature instead of burying it under civilization and law. Most humans forget what they are, Owen said as they walked through the jungle. He moved through the dense vegetation like it was open ground, with an ease that Victoria could never match. You build cities and laws and codes. You pretend that predation is something primitive, something you have evolved beyond. But it is not. Predation is the core of what makes humans dangerous. You hunt ideas, you hunt resources, you hunt status and power. You hunt each other when the laws tell you that you can. The only difference between us and you is that we acknowledge what we are. They came to a clearing where a kill had just been made. A large jungle cat, one that would have killed a human easily in a direct fight. It lay dead, struck down by coordinated hunters who had understood its behavior, its weaknesses, its fear responses. There were 5 humans standing around it, beginning the process of butchering the animal with stone tools that had edges sharper than any metal blade. Victoria realized that Owen's people were not using advanced technology, but they were using advanced knowledge. They understood leverage, angles, materials, and efficient movement. They were engineers, but with stone and bone instead of metal and circuits. They were scientists, but their laboratory was the living jungle. You think you are apex because of your machines, Owen said. Your guns, your airplanes, your computers, these are fine things, but I will tell you something that will trouble you. Machines can fail, computers can break, but the human mind, the human ability to adapt and understand and survive, that cannot fail. That is why we are apex, not because of what we have built, but because of what we are. A sound came through the jungle then, a distress call from one of Owen's people. A member of their hunting party had been injured. Who had remained at the outpost had come into the jungle armed and looking for Victoria, and he had meant well. He was trying to rescue them, but he had fired a weapon, and now one of Owen's people was bleeding from a shoulder wound. Owen's face did not change, but his body language shifted. He was no longer interested in conversation or explanation. He was interested in protecting his own. He moved fast, leaving Victoria alone in the clearing. She ran back toward the sounds of conflict, her heart pounding. When she found them, was surrounded. He had his weapon up, but Owen was already moving with a speed and precision that suggested he had anticipated this exact situation. The weapon was not going to help, not against someone who understood predation the way Owen did. Victoria shouted and Owen stopped. He looked at her, waiting. "We do not want this," Victoria said, breathing hard. "We came to understand, that is all. We did not come to fight." Victoria's voice echoed through the chamber of Meridian Prime as she brought her story to the moment of understanding. The council was silent, fully engaged now. Even Counselor had stopped making grinding sounds of impatience. Admiral was leaning forward, his body rigid with focused attention. "Owen took us back to the outpost before dawn," Victoria continued. "He did not harm us, he did not threaten us further. He simply walked with us to the boundary of his hunting ground and told us something that I have thought about every day since that moment. He said that humans were the apex predators of Earth not because we were the strongest or the fastest or the most equipped with natural weapons. We were apex because we could think, we could plan, we could cooperate, and we could choose." She paused, letting the weight of those final words settle. "Earth is not a gentle world," Victoria said. "Your records show that we have detected more than 30 major extinction events on my world. We have seen ice ages that killed 90% of all life. We have seen meteors strike from space. We have seen our own species nearly wipe itself out through warfare and disease. And through every one of these catastrophes, humans survived, not because we were lucky, but because our minds adapted, because we learned. Because we could cooperate even in the worst circumstances." Ambassador made a signal that suggested interest mixed with skepticism. "This still does not explain why you smile when asked about your apex predator, Captain, nor does it explain why you would show your teeth to the Council." Because, Victoria said, and her smile widened again, you are asking the wrong question. You think apex predator means something that hunts for food, something that kills the weak and dominates through physical power. But that is not what humans are. Humans are predators of ideas. We hunt for knowledge. We hunt for ways to improve ourselves. We hunt for solutions to problems that no other species has even considered yet. She moved to the display system and activated files that showed human history. She showed the Council images of humans adapting to every environment on Earth. She showed images of humans surviving in deserts, in frozen wastelands, on mountains where the air itself was thin enough to kill. She showed them the history of human innovation and technology, from the first tool created from a stone to the spacecraft that had brought her to this council chamber. Humans were not apex because of teeth, Victoria said. We were apex because we invented weapons when we had none. We were apex because we learned to cooperate in groups. We were apex because we could imagine futures that did not yet exist and then make them real. She showed images of human wars, of human suffering, of the worst that humanity had to offer. She did not shy away from the dark parts of her species' history. She laid it all bare for the Council to see. We are dangerous, Victoria said simply. Not because we are physically superior, but because we understand violence, we understand strategy, we understand the cost of conflict, and we are willing to pay that cost if we believe in something strongly enough. Humans will die for ideas. Humans will sacrifice everything they have for a cause they believe in. What other species in this chamber can say that about themselves? Counselor made a long, grinding sound. When he spoke, his voice was different, more careful. You are saying that humans are fanatical. No, Victoria replied. I am saying that humans are willing to sacrifice. There is a difference. A human will walk into fire to save someone they love. A human will face impossible odds if it means protecting the future of their children. A human will think about a problem for years, decades, even centuries until they find a solution. We are patient predators. We are capable of waiting. And we are capable of learning from every failure until we succeed. She showed the Council more images. Humans climbing mountains. Humans exploring oceans. Humans surviving plagues and famines and wars. Humans rebuilding after catastrophe. Humans creating art and music and science even when survival itself was uncertain. What you should fear about humans, Victoria said, addressing the entire Council now with a voice that carried strange power, is not that we kill easily. What you should understand is that we are too hard to kill. We survive, we adapt, we learn, we thrive even in the worst circumstances. And we do all of this while maintaining the capacity for mercy. We can be brutal and we can be compassionate. We can compete fiercely and cooperate completely. We are apex predators because we contain all the possibilities of what a predator can be. Admiral made a sound of respect, a clicking series of tones that translated to something like approval mixed with military acknowledgement. You describe your species as if you are warning us, Captain. I am not warning you, Victoria said. I am explaining there is a difference. A warning implies threat, an explanation implies respect, and respect implies the possibility of partnership. She looked directly at Ambassador. You asked what humans fear most, what our apex predator is. The answer is that we do not fear anything, not truly. We are afraid of loss. We are afraid of not being able to protect those we care about. But we do not fear being hunted because we understand hunting completely. We are the hunters, the apex, and we have chosen to come to this council not as conquerors, but as equals asking for recognition. The council chamber fell completely silent. For a moment, even the hum of the life support systems seemed muted. Victoria waited. She had said what needed to be said. She had shown what needed to be shown. The choice of how to respond was no longer hers. The first voice to break the silence belonged to Admiral. The warrior leaned back in his seat and made a long series of clicking sounds. When they were translated, his words carried a weight that echoed through the chamber. I have fought in wars across 12 star systems, said. I have faced creatures with armor that would resist nuclear weapons. I have stood against hive fleets and individual champions. And I tell you that what Captain Cross describes is more dangerous than any of those things. A species that cannot be broken, that adapts to every challenge, that thinks generations ahead, that is a true predator. He paused, and then he added something that made the chamber shift with new energy. I respect such a species, and I vote to recognize humanity as full strategic partners in galactic affairs. Counselor's crystalline form seemed to vibrate with thought processes running at speeds that biological entities could not comprehend. When he finally spoke, His voice was carefully neutral, but there was something underneath it. Something that might have been caution, or might have been fear. "The silicon-based collective sees value in what you have presented," said. "The capacity for adaptation and learning that you describe would be useful in solving problems that have resisted our solutions for centuries. We will support your petition for full partnership status." One by one, the other council members voted. Some quickly, some after long deliberation. But all of them voted the same way. Humanity was recognized. Earth's apex predator had taken its place among the powers of the galaxy. When the voting was complete, Ambassador rose from his seat. The gesture was significant because the hive mind collective rarely rose for anything. It was a mark of respect or acknowledgement of something profound. "Captain Cross, I asked you earlier what humans consider their apex predator. You did not answer my question directly. You told a story instead. But I think now I understand. The apex predator of Earth is not a creature that hunts other species. It is the collective will of your entire species. It is humans hunting for better futures. It is humans adapting to challenges. It is humans choosing to survive and thrive rather than fade away." Made a gesture that was difficult to interpret, something between a bow and a signal of alignment. "That is a formidable force. I am glad that we are meeting you now when you are still learning your own power. I suspect that in 1,000 years, humanity will be something even we cannot fully predict." Victoria stood in the center of the chamber, and she felt the weight of the moment. She understood what had just happened. She understood the significance of what the council had just decided. Humanity was no longer a species asking to join the galactic community. Humanity was a species that had forced its way in through sheer force of explanation, not through weapons, but through truth. She thought about Owen in the jungle. She thought about the way he had smiled when he showed her the truth about what humans could be. She thought about the moment when she had understood that the apex predator was not something that hunted humans. It was something that hunted everything else, and then chose when to show mercy. Now, standing before the most powerful entities in the galaxy, Victoria allowed herself that same smile. The smile that showed teeth. The smile that said, "I understand what I am." The smile that said, "I am not threatening you, but I am not afraid of you either." The council members began to stand. It was not a standing ovation, because most of them could not feel emotions like admiration or excitement in the way biological entities did. But it was a standing recognition, an acknowledgement of something that had shifted in the balance of power in the galaxy. Victoria walked out of the chamber, and as she passed each delegate, she saw something different in their eyes. The species saw a kindred warrior. They saw a herding partner who understood both protection and predation. The silicon-based entities saw a pattern of logic and adaptation that interested them deeply, and the various other species saw something they had not seen before. They saw humans as fully formed, fully realized beings who had earned their place among the stars. The next day, the media outlets across the galaxy began their coverage. Human delegation gains full partnership status. But the story that everyone shared, the story that made the news, was Victoria's explanation of Earth's apex predator. It was the smile. It was the teeth. It was the understanding that a true predator was not something to be feared blindly, but something to be respected as an equal. Over the following weeks, more information about humanity came to light. The council began requesting research on human history, human biology, human culture. Scientists across the galaxy became obsessed with understanding how a species could evolve such capacity for both violence and compassion, such ability for cooperation and competition, such willingness to sacrifice, and such drive to survive. But Victoria knew the truth that few others had grasped. Humans were not unique in their capacity for these things. Every species in the galaxy had some of these qualities, but humans had all of them in perfect balance. Humans were the species that had learned to be everything they needed to be in order to thrive on a world that actively tried to kill them. And that made them not the strongest predators in the galaxy. It made them the most adaptable, the most unpredictable, the most dangerous in the way that truly mattered. On the last day before the council session ended, approached Victoria one more time. The Hive Mind Collective had a question, and Victoria suspected it was not one that would be asked in the formal council setting. "Tell me something," said. "When you smiled and showed your teeth in the council chamber, what were you really saying?" Victoria thought about that for a moment. She thought about Owen in the jungle, about the moment when he had chosen not to kill, about the understanding that true predators did not need to prove their power through constant displays of strength. I was saying that we are predators, Victoria replied. But we are predators who know when to hunt and when to let live. We are dangerous, but we can choose to be safe. We are strong, but we can choose to be kind. That is what makes us apex. That is what makes us different. That is what makes us exactly what you should hope to have as allies. Made a sound that the translator rendered as understanding. Yes, I think that is the real answer to my question. The apex predator of Earth is not a beast or a creature. It is a species that understands choice, that understands mercy, that understands power and knows how to wield it wisely. Victoria watched as walked away, the hive mind collective moving with its strange coordination that was both unified and individual at once. And Victoria smiled again, that same smile that showed her teeth, and she understood that her species had just taken a crucial step toward becoming something truly great in the eyes of the galaxy. The apex predator of Earth had arrived, and it had come not with weapons but with truth. Owen lowered his hand. The weapon fell unused. He looked then back at Victoria. You understand now, yes? You understand what it means to be apex. It is not just the ability to kill. It is the understanding of when to kill and when to let live. It is the choice that separates a true predator from a simple beast. Stared uncomprehending, but Victoria understood. She understood completely. The apex predator of Earth was not something that hunted humans. It was humans themselves. Simply honest, and that honesty carried a weight that commanded attention. Tell us, Captain said, we are listening. Victoria looked up at the assembled council, at beings of such power and intelligence that any one of them could destroy her civilization with effort. Then she smiled that same smile, the one that seemed to contain knowledge they could not access. She showed her teeth when she smiled. Among predators, that was a significant gesture. Thank you, she said. Then I will tell you about the day I learned what Earth's apex predator truly is. I will tell you about the day I learned what we are.